Redding is a beautiful place. We have national parks in 3 different directions, 2 world-class lakes. This is a sportsman's paradise, but it's also full of wonderful people. We have business leaders, community leaders, faith-based leaders, all of them working towards a singular goal, and that's to make this a great place to live. I wanted to showcase these people, give their perception of the place that they call home. This is AllRedding. I'm here with Brian Berg, officer. Brian Berg from the Redding Police Department. Thanks for coming today. I'd shake your hands, but my hands suddenly got clammy. I wonder if that's like a law enforcement thing.
Yeah,
like I'm suddenly nervous. I'm just like, do I have any paraphernalia on me? I don't think so. I don't normally carry any, you know. Anyway, I bet you get that a lot though, right?
It's on my pants.
Yeah, these are, yes. I just borrowed this car from a friend. What friend? I don't even know him that well.
Yep.
Yeah. I used to watch Cops. I love the bad boys, and the explanations of.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I bet you've got a few of those, huh?
Got a few of those.
You got a few
stories.
Yeah. You've been with RPD. Is this like year 26?
26 years.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Getting up there, man.
More most of my adult life.
Yeah.
My entire adult life. Yeah.
And you're not originally from Redding. You came here for the job. Yeah.
I did. Yeah. Born and raised in the Bay Area, East Bay, Fremont. My dad was a cop down in the city of Milpitas, which is north of San Jose.
Sure.
I retired as a commander down there. And so I kind of grew up in a law enforcement family my whole life and going to the police department and being around that type of atmosphere my whole life. And so out of high school, went to junior college and ended up in Chico at Butte College and knew I wanted to chase a law enforcement career. It's really all I knew that I really wanted to do, and just put myself through the police academy and got 1997 I was in the police academy, and getting hired was extremely hard back then. So I threw applications out up and down the state for the most part. A few places I didn't want to work, but a lot of places I didn't mind working. During that time, I met my now wife. She was at Chico State. We actually grew up junior high, high school all together. She's 2 years younger than I am, so we never really knew each other in high school, but we met in college and started dating like in August. And I got offered the job in Redding in January of '98 and said, well, if I can get this job, I can keep this relationship going for a couple of years and maybe bounce back to the Bay Area where we're both from and work down there. And so, yeah, she ended up graduating college and coming up here and going to Simpson for her teacher credential and her master's, and got a job at Shasta High School early in her career also. And next thing you know, it's 26 years later, and here we are.
You guys are both from Milpitas,
Fremont.
but you didn't really know each other.
Correct.
And you ended up meeting in Chico.
Yeah. Knew of each other. I probably rode my bicycle by our house every single day, going to elementary school, junior high, and walking by our house to high school. And knew of her. We knew each other but never knew each other.
And that might actually been the connection. Then you might be like, hey,
it was.
Okay,
it was.
Okay, that makes some more sense. Like,
yep. We ended up at an event back in Fremont, and she was there. And I go, hey, you're up in Chico too, right? And long story short, I gave her my number, thinking she's way out of my league. There's no way she'll ever call me, and she did.
And because this is pre police mustache.
Oh yes. I didn't grow the mustache. I was about 45 years old.
Yeah.
I waited till I was
able to
mature enough to grow a mustache. Yeah.
I'm still not mature.
I'm not either, but I pull it off.
What's funny is my wife and I are from here, and her dad was my mailman, and we both went to Chico State, and we met in Chico.
Okay.
So, but that's not quite the Fremont. Fremont to Chico's a little bit. That's a little bit further. Yeah. But similar thing.
Yeah. It's funny how life works.
And so you were looking at. I would have thought that not only was it hard to get on law enforcement straight out of the academy and everything, but also a small department. I mean, Redding is we talk about California.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of
mid-sized department for California.
Mid-sized?
Yeah. Mid-sized.
Okay. Yeah. Because I think a lot of the law enforcement goes through the bigger cities, right? Like people start off in LA or San Francisco, and then they transfer out, right?
Yeah,
like
everybody takes their own path on where they want to go, and sometimes agencies sponsor officers too, so you get hired before you even go to the academy, and the agency will send you to the academy and then bring you back. There's different viewpoints on how you do that. Sometimes we'll hire people to put themselves through the academy. It's cheaper for them. For a city, obviously, if I paid myself through the academy, paid my way through, for the city to pick me up.
Good ROI, though. I'm sure you got your money back, right?
Oh, they did. Yeah.
It's a good investment, right?
Yeah. For the city, it's a good investment because they don't really have anything into you, right? And so if you don't make training, there's a whole training process that takes place once you get hired as a police officer, because the academy teaches you this much on how to really be a police officer.
That's kind of college, right?
It's that field training program that really gets you past the muster. And you have to pass that. If you don't pass that, they say thank you, no thank you. It doesn't mean you can't be a cop somewhere else, just you're not a good fit for our city. And so for a city to hire somebody like that, it's really no interest in them to pay somebody to go to the police academy and bring back and then not make it. We're into that person a lot of money, and so it's a little harder to separate from that person. So it's a give and take. So
in the 26 years you've been here, you've probably seen Redding change quite a bit.
Dramatically, yes.
If you think about some of the, I want to get into. You're a police officer, so and that's such a right word, maybe enigmatic. I'm one of those people that I wish I had a better vocabulary. So
I don't know that.
I know I'm mixing it. I'm trying. I need to do the word of the day app.
Right.
But it's one of those professions that's more than just a profession.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
There's a lot. There's a lot around being in law enforcement.
Yeah.
Okay. And so when you meet people in law enforcement, it kind of dominates the conversation versus when you meet accountants, you might have a couple of quick tax questions or so. But I want to talk about other things because you're heavily involved in our community in a lot of ways through law enforcement, but outside of law enforcement. But since we're talking about law enforcement, I would like to talk about what you've seen change-wise, because I have some ideas on things that have changed over the years with crime. I've never thought Redding had a crime problem. Maybe it's because I watched so much forensic files, and I'm like, and they're almost never based in Redding.
Right.
But what can you say about like Redding's crime right now and changes we've seen maybe over your span of your career? It's almost 3 decades.
Yeah, absolutely. And viewpoints change too, right? People as individuals change, and my viewpoint changes of things, what they look like. 22-year-old me, brand new police officer, hot and ready to go out into the job, viewed things differently than I do now as a 26-year veteran and been through some stuff also. So all that, I give these answers with that grain of salt of like my viewpoint back then, and even looking back on them changes from what I might have thought at that time.
I hope so. That's called growth.
That's
right?
growth. Absolutely. It's called, yeah, exactly. So, I think a lot of things have changed in Redding. We've obviously grown as a community, which is always what I've wanted to see as this community. It's a wonderful place to live. It still is a wonderful place.
Absolutely.
To live. Do we have crime? Absolutely, we have crime.
What city doesn't?
do? Yeah, every city does. Do we have a homeless problem? Yes, we do. But every city has a homeless problem.
In America, unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah, and it is a lot of California issues. We've talked about kind of the California laws and kind of the political atmosphere and how that's changed crimes in California cities across the board.
Changed kind of the definition of crime.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
I mean, there's some things now that aren't crimes that were 10 years ago. That was a crime.
Yeah,
right?
15 years ago, if I found somebody had a little bit of methamphetamine on them, right, we would send that person to prison. Right, that's how it is a felony, and they didn't always go to prison, but after a certain amount of contacts having the same.
I don't know why I was so shocked when you said if I found methamphetamine, you go to prison. I think the word methamphetamine in prison connotates my body had a visceral reaction.
No, that's okay.
Yeah,
but the laws view that as a felony, as a felonious crime, and since Prop 47 and AB 109 have passed, it's decriminalized really narcotics use, and so that's a topic from 5, 6, 8, 10 years ago, obviously, but it's still very relevant today as far as how do we handle those types of things. And as a police officer and as a citizen, I look at it as accountability, right? Are drugs victimless crimes? People argue it is because they're just doing it to themselves. But who's a victim as a result of drug use? You are, I am, your mom, the people who have.
If people that use drugs contain it to themselves,
correct,
then I think you argue, but that rarely,
it
rarely stays contained themselves.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. We used to have the DARE program back in the day, drug abuse resistant education. There's another acronym that says drugs are really expensive. DARE. People, they can't contain a drug habit and maintain a 9-to-5 job. Right. This is very hard.
Not outside of Wall Street.
Yeah. Right.
It's almost impossible outside of Wall Street.
Especially
or DC.
Especially street drugs. Right.
Yeah.
That's super hard to do. So what do you do as a result of that? You go steal. You break into unlocked cars, break into cars, steal things to sell them. They steal your, $2,000 stereo out of your car. I'm sure you have one of those. I don't, but some people do. And they sell it on the street for $50 bag of meth or whatever like that. And so, you become a victim because of that, property crimes that are direct result of drug abuse. And the problem we have with that is that there is no accountability. We created drug programs and educational programs and rehab, but there's no way to force those people into those programs. Does that make sense? Without accountability. We kind of attribute it to, when your kid's little and they are misbehaving, and as a parent you go, it's just Johnny being Johnny's acting up, and he smacks mom maybe, right? No, Johnny, knock it off. It's just Johnny being Johnny. You never do anything about it. And Johnny grows up and becomes more and more, your name's not Johnny, is it?
No.
Kid named Johnny. They can grow up and get more and more emboldened as they get older. Now Johnny's 18 years old, and he's, misbehaved his whole life without any consequences to that. Where if you provide consequences in the home and have timeouts or you're restricted or whatever that means.
Some type of discipline.
Right? Yeah. Johnny's behaviors will probably curve. And now you have grown, grown adults who you're still not disciplining them when they do things bad. Right? And they're allowed to get away with things over and over and over again, whether that's breaking into your car or property crimes, it's nonviolent, or drug use. And we're saying, hey, no big deal. We're just going to write you a ticket for it. And you don't have to go to court for it because there's really no consequences for you going to court. What is their motivation to change their life? Because there is no adverse consequences to their actions, right? And that's what these laws have done in California primarily. And we've seen that directly happen here at home with us.
So does that mean we're seeing a rise in the ancillary crimes? Since the drug itself isn't a crime, are we seeing like rises in theft and burglary and assault and battery?
Absolutely. We have steadily since those laws passed. And it goes directly to, like I said, there's just no consequences for people's actions. Right? If I can say, listen, we have a rehab program available to you. And as a consequence of your drug abuse or your stealing things because of your drug abuse, we're going to send you to rehab and get you better. Right? Mm-hmm. And you have to go to that. If you don't go to that, then what? Nothing? Or you're going to go to jail. Right? People are more apt to go, well, I would rather go to rehab than the jail. It might be a forced thing, but at least we're doing something to fix the problem. Right? We're giving them the resources they need and the tools they need to maybe be more successful once they've completed that program. But now I have a drug problem, and I go to court and they say, hey, I want you to go to drug rehab. And they go, what if I don't want to? They're like, well, we're kind of full on jail space and we really can't do anything else with you. So, what's their motivation? Unless you are personally motivated to go out and change your life, which 1 in 1,000 might be, which is great. That's fantastic. We want to see that.
Those are really low odds.
Very low odds. And I'm making up numbers. Those aren't factual numbers. Okay. In general,
that's really bad.
People I see aren't willing to go
and
get the help. And it's the same thing with the homeless population that we have in town. The Good News Rescue Mission, Jonathan Anderson runs an amazing program.
I heard nothing but good things about him in the program.
And up until, I'll be honest with you, up until 5-6 years ago, maybe a little longer, I was one of those people that were like, oh, the mission's the problem, right? People are coming to Redding because of the mission. San Francisco's putting out flyers. They come to Redding for the mission. Those are things. We're bringing busloads of people to Redding and dropping them off because of the mission. You've heard all those rumors and stuff. Until I went and actually educated myself, novel concept, about what the mission does. It's an amazing program, and most of those rumors are false. Do we have people that show up for the mission? Sure, but they're not busloads of people that are coming in and doing that.
And my understanding is they're never at capacity.
They're never at capacity. To my point of, we offer, we go out and do these, we call them sweeps or whatever you want to call them, and clean up the river with all the homeless people.
I've seen that.
It's awful.
Truckloads of trash.
Truckloads of trash. Yeah. And we always offer them, every time we offer them resources, hey, the mission has beds available. We have these other, and there's 1,000 different nonprofit organizations in town that are willing to help you. And very rarely do people accept that freely. Because there's no other consequences. There's no other consequences to go back there and be back tomorrow with as much trash on the river again. And this repetitive cycle. And so, how do we get out of that? Because if we're asking people to voluntarily get off the street and fix their problems, they're not going to. And a lot of that is because of it's generational. They don't know how to, right? They don't have basic skills like you and I might have of how to clean my room or how to do dishes, right? Those are common skills that, most of us have. Husbands.
Whether we exercise,
husbands don't do it as well as as our wives would like us to.
We could.
We understand the concept of that. And a lot of these people, I'm generalizing, a lot of these people don't have those basic skills that we grew up with because that's not the house they grew up in. Does that make sense?
Oh,
so they don't even understand the concept.
It's sad, but yes, it does make sense. I'm sad to say yes. I know what you mean.
Yeah. They don't have the concept of I can go to the mission and get true help and get off this street and not be in this position anymore. I don't think they have the concept of that. And some of that's mental health also. We can get a whole different, we can go 12 different ways with this conversation. But
when I was growing up, it was pitched that basically homelessness was tied to poverty. And I think that was a huge, that's a fallacy. Mm-hmm. It's tied to mental illness, drugs, and alcohol.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And
Absolutely.
we have such a net for poverty. Are there people that are in that situation of poverty? But those are the super outliers. I was listening. I saw the other day a lady was talking. I'm trying to remember who she was. She's a really intelligent lady, and she in my social streams every now and then. And she was talking about how when you have conversations with people, and they continually go to the outliers, that it's either you're talking with somebody that has such a low IQ that they can't think abstractly, or they're disingenuous. Either way, stop the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So that idea of like, as soon as you say like, hey, homelessness is primarily mental illness, schizophrenia, all that, drugs and alcohol. And they go, yeah, but what about, it's like the conversation stopped because that is not even one in 100, right?
Absolutely.
So it's like sticking to what it really is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, there's a part of me that's like, that shouldn't be law enforcement. That burden should not fall upon law enforcement. That's not, is law enforcement, are you a police officer? And what I think of a police officer, someone to enforce laws, especially in the physical realm, meaning, keep people from killing each other, that kind of stuff, right? And now we're talking about social workers, psychologists, medical doctors. It feels like this burden is put on the wrong group of people.
We've become all of that. Every bit of that you just said. I'm a social
And
worker.
the jack of all
police
trades is
officer.
a master of none.
Absolutely. Yep. And I have to change my hat at a moment's notice. Right. I might be there in a social worker, mindset of like trying to get this person services, and it changes to a violent encounter immediately. And I have to change that hat and change my mentality of how I'm working. You know what I mean? And so that it becomes very, you have to be a master of a million different traits, which is what keeps the job interesting. But it's not the role of law enforcement. Law enforcement, in my personal opinion, shouldn't be out doing social work. Is that part of what we do on a daily basis? Absolutely. So part of social work is solving problems, right? And that's part of what you do. But like truly, this is a societal issue. Nobody else wants to deal with it. I say that there's a lot of people that want to deal with it but don't have the tools to deal with it. So it gets put on law enforcement, and that's generally how law enforcement goes. If somebody doesn't know how to solve a problem, fix a problem, or have an issue, they call the police. And quite often on a daily basis, we field calls of like, this isn't a police problem. I'm sorry, I know you're struggling, you're having a problem, whether this might handle, but this is not a police issue. And we have to, deny service to somebody because it's not within our realm of what we do.
In your career as a law enforcement, and I'm sure you've probably gone to a lot of conferences, you're probably, are you seeing anybody that's been able to solve this in America? Are you seeing like, hey, City X, Cheyenne, Wyoming, nailed it.
Right.
Like, do you see anybody?
I think if we've seen that, I think that model would have been replicated many times.
That's what I was hoping you were going to say. I was afraid that was the case. That no, it's not solved.
And many different communities have tried different things. Salt Lake City, Boise, Idaho, they've all tried different events and things to do. And a lot of times, what happens is a city tries to get innovative, right? And they try to force I'll use the homeless population as an example. They try to force that population to doing something so it'll solve the bigger problem. And we have a lot of these civil rights activists and organizations that come in and say, well, that's not legal to do that. These people have the right to be free and do what they want to do. If they want to live on the street, that's their right as an American citizen, which, yeah, they're kind of right. But I think sometimes that gets lost in the bigger picture of things.
That's a huge gray area.
But it happens. And cities get sued and lose millions of dollars. And so cities go, well, we're not going to do that anymore, even though it might be the right approach.
You mentioned
we're
the city.
Too afraid of getting sued for things.
Last fall, I went to Boise, Idaho. I've never been there. And one of the things that struck me was how insanely clean it was.
Yes.
We did not see a stick of gum or gum wrapper on the ground. Because my wife and I, we were there for a sporting event for our son, and I couldn't live there, but for other reasons. But I was like, where are the homeless people? And we did drive around. We did go to grocery stores. We didn't stay like in a gated community. We were in, and we never saw it. Mm-hmm. We didn't see. And so you saying you dropped Boise, Idaho in there, you triggered my mind.
Yeah.
So they must have tried something, right?
I've been to Boise and I saw the same thing.
What are they doing?
Well, they are strictly enforcing camping and unlawful. I say just camping in general. But as a result of that, the city of Boise has been sued, and there's now case law federally that says there's certain things you can't do with the homeless population as far as moving them in their campsites off the city sidewalk because that's a public place. They can be there, and so it's that's the exact example I gave. The cities now face lawsuits from civil rights organizations. And I'm not bashing civil rights organizations. They certainly have their place in what we do in society. I think they get lost in this is the new trend right now. We need to pick on this because we're going to win some money, opposed to like really looking at the societal issues and the impact this has on a society, and maybe go like, hey, let's work with law enforcement. I get what they're trying to do. Maybe let's try to guide them. Instead, we just get stopped with a lawsuit and they have to pay millions of dollars. The cities are now go, well, we're not going to do that anymore because we can't afford it. It's a bankrupt the city. So it's unfortunate. You know what I mean? I think people have good intentions in protecting people's rights, and that certainly is a valuable and respectable job to have. But we get lost in that sometimes. Of what's the bigger picture?
So shiny squirrel moment.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to try something here and see if this works. What's the best TV show that depicted law enforcement that you think of?
Right now,
of all time,
actually depicted law enforcement well.
Yeah.
I thought the show Southland was probably my personal favorite.
Okay, that was a fail, by the way, guys. That was a fail on my part.
Well, it's okay.
I thought you were going to say The Wire.
The Wire's decent,
and so then I was going to go to Amsterdam. I thought, man, maybe if I'm lucky, he'll say The Wire.
So I haven't watched The Wire.
Like a genius.
Yeah, I haven't watched The Wire all the way through, so I don't know. I heard it's fabulous.
And it's the Baltimore Police Department.
Yes.
It definitely touches. It's like multiple seasons. Touches upon the drug, and they at one point. I'm going to give it away. Hey, the show's been out for 20 years. If you haven't watched it, sorry. Okay, but they basically corral, and they say, okay. They go to all the drug gangs and all of a sudden they say, listen, from this block to this block, this block to this block, we're not going to do anything. You keep it in there. No violence.
Right.
No violence whatsoever. Like, and even at one point, I think two of the drug dealers shoot each other, and the cops go to the things that we're going to shut you down, and you bring him to us, and he had to go turn himself in. Like the gangs are like, dude, this is and all their numbers went down, and of course they broke it up. But I felt like it was trying to, and maybe even and then it's this weird mixture where it's like you throw your hands up, you go, you're not going to get rid of this problem, right? Yeah. So what are you trying to do? You're trying to contain it. Yeah. Like drugs won. Mm-hmm. The war on drugs won. Yeah. Like clearly. And so
every time. Yeah.
And so we're like, how do you, without you can't stop it, then contain it, control it, try to bring some semblance of humanity to it. So they were like, they brought in people say, okay, we're going to make sure you have clean needles, and here's clean needle disposal. And I've heard people like, that's crazy. I guess because they feel like you've morally given up.
Right.
But I don't know. There's two types of societies that I see outside of America. One is kind of like the Portugal approach, which I think they legalized everything, and they have, you can go shoot here, Amsterdam type thing, where you can go, you can do these things. And when you go to those places where, if you're watching the videos, it's sad. It's absolutely tragic. Sure. People are killing themselves. Yeah. They're killing themselves. Yep. But you can say that for all of San Francisco, right? Yeah. And then the other side is somewhere like Russia, where they're like, they don't
chop your fingers off.
Marijuana. Yeah, they're gonna, and those are the only two. Those are the only two that you don't. Everything else is in between, where you have this. What's with this trash? And why is this guy, and this person overdosed on a stair step in front of these kids? And it's like, I don't know how to get away from that. And so out of all those, I'm like, okay, well, I guess the Portugal one out of the three? I don't know. Yeah. And you can say, well, you've morally given up, Joey.
Yeah. But where's the answer?
I don't know.
I had the answer to, I'd be mayor.
I was going to say, you came on today to have the answer, right? Like, did anyone prep you? Sure. Yeah. So then there's no master plan that everybody has. This
exactly.
Is going to implement.
So my family and I went to Vancouver, Canada a couple of years ago on just a vacation, RV trip up there, and we went to downtown Vancouver. And same thing, like you're talking about, we're walking around, kind of like boys, you're walking around, we're like, wow, like there's not a homeless person holding a sign, not a cigarette on the ground, like speaking, like I'd sit on the curb and eat. Like it was super clean. We're like, this is a major metropolitan city. And we're like, where are they all? They got it. There has to be homeless people somewhere. And my wife wanted to see the Olympic torch. And so we put into Google, takes the torch, and we take a little drive. We end up through Chinatown. And we're like, okay, it's a little more hairy here in Chinatown. And we turn left. And there they were. And it was like a third world country. They call it, and so we researched it, like, this is wild. It was like a third world country. Like, tents out into the streets and like their own free markets going on. People selling T-shirts out of shopping carts and a fist fight on the corner. And then we cross one street and there's a family of 4 walking down the street shopping with their shopping bags. And they like didn't cross the street. And it's like, so downtown east side is what it's called. It's like 18 square blocks. Yeah, I don't know what all the rules are, but they have the dispensaries, not the dispensaries, but the safe injection sites they have with the booths that are monitored by nurses that they get needles out there. But the point is, it was the rest of the city was immaculate. It was just that it was, 18 square blocks, whatever it was. It was like the third world country. And so you kind of, again, you talk about like, is that a give up or is that a win for everybody? I think that's a loss for the people on those 18 square blocks for sure. But, for the rest of the city, they're not worried about any of that on the doorstep. You know what I mean? And so I'm not saying there's an answer in there. I'm just saying that it kind of baffled me. I'd never seen that before. Like with my own eyes, I drove through it. And I'm like, wow, like there's something to be said for like having an area that if those are people who choose to live that way. And we had the discussion about mental health. Is it really a choice? Those are, a million different discussions we could have, which is why there's probably no answer to these questions because you can dive off in so many different directions. But, is there an area you can put them and contain them more or less and contain that lifestyle as if this is a life you choose and this is where you're going to do it and you can't branch out from there. But then you get into the
what's funny?
Russia, are we making people do things they can't do? So we're just having a friendly discussion here about possibilities and options. But
well, okay. That said, you were saying that, and in my mind was the wheel. I don't know if you could tell, but the wheels.
I could
tell.
tell.
The squirrel was running,
yeah,
and the wheels were turning. And part of me was like, there's a part of me that's like, wow, you morally gave up.
Mm-hmm.
But there's another part that said, that's funny. If I went to go get a business license right now, a friend of mine was down here in the corner. He rented out the corner place, went down and got the city permit to sell wood sheds. He since left California, but he sold down here in the corner.
Yeah.
And then they came like day 3 and said, you can't do this. He's like, but I have the permits and everything. Well, we accidentally gave you the permits. So they shut him down. So I'm like, that idea that, hey, we have freedoms. It's like, well, when you go to make money, when you go to do a business, there's constraints.
Right.
If I wanted to get a driver's license, there's constraints. If I wanted to get a burn permit, there's constraints.
Absolutely. Yeah. Very good point.
It's
weird I never thought of it that way.
I didn't either until just now, but I thought, but we do that.
That's why we do conversations like this, right?
There you go. Like, you look around the city, it's zoning. There's a reason why it doesn't go house, motel, funeral parlor, house. Like, it's like this is commercial, that's office, this is a warehouse, and then here's residential over here. Mm-hmm. So that idea that you'd say, hey, look, we're going to allow, if you're not going to get rid of it, and I think also, locally, we need to act locally, but we are controlled by state, and we are controlled nationally. And so, I think I want to move on to other things.
Sure,
I feel like we could sit and talk for hours about this.
100%.
And I didn't really, one of my big things, like I told you, is that I definitely want solutions. I have no problem talking about problems.
Yeah.
I think it's good and healthy to talk about the problems we have, but I like to fixate more on the solution. Say, okay, hey, this is a problem. And I would say, as we maybe segue, one of the things we can do is, I super appreciate anybody that went down and helped clean up. Like, so I've seen those posts where they show up with like basically one of those dump trailers. You guys have a dedicated dump trailer.
Yeah.
And they fill it to the rim.
Oh, yeah.
And
thousands of pounds every day.
Yeah. And so anybody that I'm sure do people volunteer and help, right? It's not just law enforcement, right? Like
they have cleanup days, but for the most part, it's our cleanup crew that goes out. We have a couple of civilian community service officers, non-sworn, with a sworn officer that go out and they give warnings and they tag camps to say, hey, you need to move, take what you need, based on the laws that we have in the city already, ordinances we have, and if they fail to move and leave, then they go out and do the cleanup for them. So there's a process, a legal process we go through. I can't just show up and start taking your stuff, right, unless you abandon it and leave it. But so there's ways that we do that. But yes, it's just our crews that do that. There are organized days that volunteer groups get together and do those cleanups also. And we sometimes assist them depending on what they're doing, or provide safety more than
I was about to say,
safety. It's quite unsafe in some of those places.
Oh, I imagine. So, I've had some interactions, and I'm kind of a big guy. My wife's got some stories of where she goes to the store without me. and just had some interactions.
Mhm.
And I was like, yeah, I don't have those interactions, but I'm also 6'2", 240 pounds.
Right.
People don't tend to get upset with me if I'm not willing to give them something.
Right.
Okay, well, shifting.
Yeah.
So you held a number of different hats
Mhm.
inside the Redding Police Department. A couple of them that intrigued me. I think everybody's intrigued by canine.
Mhm.
I mean, dogs are cool.
Yeah.
Who doesn't
Yeah.
like dogs, right?
Everybody.
Especially,
Yeah.
and then was it just watch John Wick 3 if you want to see some super law enforcement dogs in action. But you did canine, and I also want to talk about you also. What's the name of the program where you go into the schools and you interact with the kids?
School resource officer.
Yeah, let's talk about the school resource.
Yeah,
The dogs kids first.
Yeah,
dogs
absolutely.
second. That's fair.
Absolutely, it's fair.
So tell me a little bit about that. Like your stint in that, and kind of what some of the things you guys, the law enforcement, does with the kids.
Yeah, so school resource officer program is something very near and dear to my heart. I was involved pretty early in my career as maybe a 3 or 4 year cop when I got involved with that. So I was in my mid-20s at the time, so fairly younger, but I was able to relate to a lot of those kids too. I wasn't that far removed from that mentality in the high school. But honestly, outside of canine, it was probably one of the more rewarding jobs I've had in my entire career. And the ability to go into a school as a police officer. And I worked high schools. We have 2 high school officers and 2 elementary school officers that kind of split the city and the different schools. But as a high school resource officer, the ability to go in and build relationships with not only the youth, but staff, parents, administrators. And those are things that I still have to this day. Many of those kids who were seniors, we had myself, my wife had kids later in life. They had kids younger in life. So all of our kids kind of grew up and went to school together. Hey, you were my student at Shasta High School back in the day, and I still have a lot of those relationships to this day. But it's really what guided me throughout the rest of my career. As a young officer, it gave me the insight of the power of relationships in this profession. As a police officer, you obviously stand out. You walk into the room, everybody looks at you.
Yeah,
you're the focal point. That's just part
got a gun.
Part of the uniform, right? Yeah.
Not a lot of people can just walk around.
People automatically change how they react, and there's a perception of law enforcement by a lot of people, and different people have different perceptions based on their own interactions, maybe with law enforcement as well. But the ability to go in there and really develop relationships and change people's opinion of who we are. Like, I'm just a person. There's a reason I didn't come here in uniform today, right? I came here in my civilian clothes because I'm just a person. And to have kids see that through the uniform of like, hey, like you pull my hair on my arm, it hurts just like yours does. I bleed, I cry, all the same things that you do. I just have a job, right? And I'm trained to do some things different. But at the end of the day, like, I'm just a person. I'm no different than you or your parents. I just have a different job and different outlook on things based on my experiences that I've had. And to be able to help kids through that. And like I said, parents and teachers, administrators alike, your swath of influence really like expands exponentially when you build those relationships. And you have the opportunity to really change perceptions generationally, right? These kids who I had when they're my students as a school resource officer, they now have kids. And they're telling their kids, hey, remember Officer Berg? He was a cool guy. Cops are good people. Right? I've now influenced 2 generations of the Redding community by my interactions in schools. And so that's just a small segment of that. And the reward I got out of doing that job. But it was a lot of fun.
What is the, for the resource officer, like what is your, I don't want to say agenda, but what is it like your manifest? Like you're going into the schools to what? Just make sure there's a good relationship, or you know what I mean? What are you like, hey, this is why we come here. This is why we have this relationship.
Yeah.
What can you tell me what that was?
First and foremost, obviously, safety of the students, right? School resource officer program really took off after the Columbine shootings. I came in right after the Santee shootings in Southern California, San Diego, Santee High School. There's a similar Columbine, similar to the Columbine thing, not as bad. Columbine's obviously the big name that everybody knows outside of some recent things. So really it came off the heels of that, of we need armed people on campus to protect our kids, right? And I know that's still controversial to this day, as some people think, but the true purpose of the program is to provide safety to the schools and the student body. My goal coming in as a school resource officer, the schools didn't have any real safety. They had fire alarms. We all did fire alarms.
Yep.
Growing up in the Bay Area, we had earthquake drills. We don't have that as much up here. But we didn't really have, if somebody comes onto campus as a threat, what do we do? Nobody really knew. What do we do? And that was a whole mind shift that we had to have in the entire education. My wife's in education, so this is I see it from both sides as well. But to educate the schools, develop programs to provide better safety to students on campus, and develop active shooter drills. And we say active shooter drills, but really any menace that happens on campus. Somebody wanders onto campus that's not supposed to be there. We don't know their intentions. Any threat that might happen to students outside of a fire or a bomb drill or a earthquake drill, what does that look like? And so really developing those plans on how do we accomplish that. And so my goal getting to Shasta High School was where I worked initially, was to develop those plans with administrators, with students, with teachers. We had a whole committee to put together on how we can best do this. And those, still in place today to all the schools. It's evolved, obviously, as we all do as things change. And we didn't have social media back then or cell phones. Everybody had cell phones. We had Nextel phones that we had. That's about it. But really, that's the primary purpose of having an officer on campus. Obviously, that can't consume your day. So you find other things to do, whereas we talk about the relationship building and different just daily things that happen on campus. At the time, a student brings marijuana onto campus. That was a criminal offense at the time. It still is. Yeah, but dealing with it is more severe back then, obviously. But it's just dealing with those criminal acts that happen on campus, fighting, any other threats that might happen on campus, just kind of curbing that behavior. And the goal, obviously, as a police officer to come on is build good people. Right? It behooves me to make good citizens going forward in our community, right? If I can have influence on some kids and they go out and do great things in this community, then that's good for all of us. And that's really the end goal, and to keep them safe in the process.
Did you ever run into anything like any dangers on school? I don't know that happening in Redding.
There's been a few, nothing super major. Most of them are threats of or a report of. We had an incident. It's UPrep now. It used to be the Shasta Learning Center. It used to be a whole different thing.
I'm so old that I went there in Nova High School.
I've heard of Nova.
Yeah, ninth grade only high school.
Yep.
What an experiment.
Exactly.
Please, go.
Yeah, no, that's good. We had a report on this is 20-ish years ago of somebody walking to the front of the campus holding a gun. And I was nearby, and it just brought the entire, every law enforcement entity you could think of showed up on that campus within 5 minutes. It was pretty amazing. But we learned lessons out of that too as a law enforcement community of that's great. We had 88 cops show up, but what are we all doing? Do we have roles? Do we have responsibilities? Is everybody just flooding the campus? That's not good either. And so we had to kind of re-advise what that looks like, that massive response. I can control what Redding officers do, showing up, and have some sheriff's deputies showing up, and CHP officers, and game wardens, and probation officers, right? Everybody wants to help. Ended up being nothing. Ended up being totally unfounded. But that was a report we had, and we had to treat it accordingly. So as a law enforcement profession, how do we, change and evolve and do things better as well? And out of every incident, that's why we always debrief after any critical incident that happens. We have an officer-involved shooting, we have a pursuit, we have anything that happens, we come together and talk about that afterwards of hey, one went good, one went bad. Let's try not to replicate the bad things, right? Somebody's going too fast, somebody crashed, whatever that looks like, and try to improve as a profession and as individuals.
So you did the resource officer for several years.
Mm-hmm.
And did you stay at the high school level, or did you go down to elementary as well?
I did. I helped at elementary schools in the absence of those guys, but I stayed down there at the high schools.
Their mandate is safety as well,
yep,
or do
absolutely.
they get? Okay.
And they deal with a different age of kids, obviously.
Yeah.
So they're dealing with preschoolers through 5th graders, 6th graders sometimes. So it's different. As a high school officer, I can arrest all of those kids if I have to. I take them to juvenile hall, let's go. As a elementary school officer, you don't really have that option as much unless it's something really, really bad. So how you handle kids on enforcement type of actions changes as well. But you have the surrounding areas too, traffic enforcement around the school, especially high schoolers leaving for lunch and driving like maniacs, curbing that behavior. All those things kind of, come together as one.
And so then you went from that, and then you got into K-9?
Yeah, came back into patrol for a couple of years, and then went into a K-9 position. So we hadn't had dogs at the Redding Police Department for over a decade. We had a couple of dope dogs that we had, drug dogs. There was labs, and were great, but didn't do the person searching stuff that we were looking for in law enforcement. So I was fortunate enough to start our K-9 program back in 2003, and it's still going strong today.
And you're involved in helping relocate these dogs too afterwards, right? Didn't you're part of a program that after they retire, they put them in homes or something like that?
No.
Remember?
So no, we have Communities for Police Canines is a nonprofit organization that we have, and I helped start that with Kelly Jo Kella, who was a community member at the time, And I'd always had this idea of we was some sort of community nonprofit that would support the dogs. Dogs are expensive.
Oh, I bet.
They're expensive to purchase, expensive to keep up, all the things that go along with that. And city obviously has limited funds. And then you talk about dogs when they retire, what happens to them? Almost exclusively they stay with the handler. Very rarely they get adopted out. We've never had a dog adopted out. But we have medical bills as the dog gets older. You know, all the things that happen to us happen to dogs. And we have this dog now that's served our community for 10 or 12 years. And now the handler has to foot the bill thousands of dollars when this dog's now 10, 12 years old. And so our nonprofit helps supplement those vet bills as the dog gets older, help the officer not have to come out of his own pocket and pay for those things. Because the city, once he retires, the city's done with the dog. They don't pay for it anymore. While they're working, the city covers all those medical bills, obviously.
So those dogs are like, was that like Schützen training, I think they call it, right? Like dogs are highly, when you get them, there's a lot of money invested in them.
There is.
A lot.
There is. We get our dog through a vendor. So we get calls all the time of, hey, we have this dog that's just not working out at the house. We'd love to donate it to the department, which is great. We get it. It's like, that's awesome. But there's a lot that goes into training dogs and money that goes into them. And so we buy our dogs from vendors. And our vendor, we trust our vendor to go out wherever they need to purchase a dog. A lot of our dogs come from the Czech Republic. That's where our vendor gets most of his dogs and brings them over here. And they come over with some basic training. They know how to do some bite work, and they've been tested for law enforcement, some courage testing. So you can't just take a regular dog and expect them to perform like a police dog. There's certain skills and prey drive versus defense drive that they have that dogs have. We want a balance of. You don't want a dog that's a land shark that's going to go out and bite everything and just be crazy, right? And that's a prey drive. We're not chasing things. And there's a defense drive where a dog gets scared and bites you because he's scared, right? That's what most domestic dogs, when you get bit by a domestic dog, that's why they're biting. They're scared and they bite and they run away, right? You've seen that all the time. If you get a dog that's biting you and holding on and not letting go, that's a high prey drive, and that's dangerous as well. So you really want the police dog, you want that balance of enough prey that when I say go out and do something, he's going to go out and do it, enough defense that he's going to protect himself, that I don't want too much of the other. A good balance there. So we trust our vendor to find those dogs for us, and then we bring them in and do a month-long training, and then it's every month we're doing 16 hours a month of training with our dogs. 16 hours a month. So every week we're doing 4 to 8 hours a month, a week training the dogs. It's constant that we do.
And you said something about so these dogs are, I can't remember the term you just used, but you said we had the drug dogs, which were labs, which are just like narcotics dogs. Mm-hmm. These are not narcotics dogs. These are...
We call them patrol dogs.
Patrol dogs, okay.
Yeah, so the person-focused. We can cross-train, so even though I'll say a person-focused dog can be cross-trained to work as a drug dog also, they can do both. But I say a person dog is a primary focus is to find people. And police dogs are first and foremost locating tools. We use them to find people and things because their nose is 10,000 times better than ours. And if dogs didn't find people or find things, we probably wouldn't have police dogs in American society. That's because of that locating tool that we have is why we have police dogs. The bites and all that stuff is obviously high profile and it's fun to watch during demonstrations, but what we actually do when we actually bite somebody is a very small percentage versus actually deploying a dog to go find them. We only bite people under the most extreme circumstances of somebody is truly fighting us or a very dangerous person running away that's going to be a danger to you and your family if he gets away, or a guy that's hiding from us that isn't coming out, and use that dog to go in and distract him until we can go and make that person safe.
So you did canine for a while, but
13 years I did it.
13 years, no moss, right? You're not doing any.
No more. Yeah, no more. Yes,
Spanish.
Yeah. But I recently pointed back to the canine that just made corporal, which is a supervisor role. So I just got newly appointed back to as a canine supervisor now. So I'm supervising the guys that have dogs now. So
how many dogs do we have?
We have 6 currently.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Yep.
And these are all out in the field helping with law enforcement.
Yep.
When we talk about crime, I'm going to shift around a little bit. I wasn't going to try to make this all police, but it feels like that's
okay.
what we're talking about.
Yeah. We do this in community stuff too. That's
I would love to.
Near and dear to my heart as well. So I'll go wherever you want to go with this thing.
We were joking.
I got 8 hours.
We got 8 hours. I was joking before the camera started. When I said we were talking about what we were going to talk about, and I said, "Well, you came to give us your crypto advice, right?"
Right. Yeah. Don't get it from me. I'm terrible.
Buy low, sell high.
Doge. Buy Doge.
Yeah. Big Elon fan. Huh? Okay. So, in regards to the canine, in regards to crime, I don't know if I guess I don't pay attention. I really don't, and I do this because the news is so it's dominated with negativity. That's what sells. Unfortunately, then we slow down when we're driving for a car wreck. That's just we're wired for what's going on, and so I've tried to control what I take in, just like what I put in my mouth. I've noticed a correlation of what I put in my brain and how I feel. If I'm reading all of the bombastic, negative headlines, then I'm like, I gotta sell everything. I gotta dig a hole. I gotta, I gotta start canning my own peaches. Like, dude, bring it down a notch. Bring it down a notch. It's not Armageddon. Just you've got
not yet.
Yeah, it's not just yet. So what happens is I find myself not really being abreast of some of the information, but Redding crime. We don't. How many murders a year? We don't really. This is not a murder place.
Right.
I would say that the vast majority of crime is probably burglary, petty theft, or something along those lines. But please, edify me.
Yeah, we call those quality of life for property. Property crimes are quality of life crimes. We distinctly separate those from violent crimes, which are homicides, armed robberies, those types of things, and then more or less property crimes and nonviolent crimes. And so, very disproportionate in this town. We don't have a lot of violent crimes. We do have violent crimes,
which is a good thing.
They happen. This week's been extraordinarily rare for us. We've had several armed incidents and shootings this last week for whatever reason. It's just kind of coming up
connected or
separate? No, pretty much separate. Very odd that we have that many in 1 week. But there were a lot of people with guns running around town, not legal guns, bad guys with guns, and we quite often look at our Facebook page and scroll through in the last 6 months, and probably every 10th post and be a picture of a bunch of guns. And we're not talking about legal gun owners carrying without a concealed weapon. We're talking about really bad people, drug dealers and other bad people that are having these guns. So it's not uncommon that we find those. They don't always make the news. They don't make the headlines. They don't make Channel 7. But we do get those quite a bit. And there's a lot of stuff that happens that doesn't get reported to the public in general. We're pretty good about reporting stuff on our social media. The news picks up what they want to out of that. But we're pretty good about posting stuff on our social media with that of what's actually happening in town. We talk about you kind of not paying attention to it that much. It reminds me of a conversation I had with my wife's grandma several years ago, and I was a maybe 10-year cop, and she was, Brian, do you feel yourself getting jaded in this job? Which I understood the question, right? Because we view things differently, and I had to think kind of.
And they're dealing with some negative issues
all day long. Yeah, which is why I hang out with normal people on my days off, because it rejuvenates me.
Nice.
It's another discussion, but I remember thinking about it and going, Grandma, I look at it like a bubble, right? You, Grandma, live in a bubble. You kind of does not. You, Joe, live in a bubble.
Everybody does.
I don't mean that offensively.
No,
I get ignorant to things, but in a sense, you are, and that's good, right? We should all live in our bubbles. What I mean by that is you go from home to work, back home, go to the grocery store, back home to school, back home to vacation. Then you come back home, and that's what I mean by a bubble. And that's your life. 90% of your life is going from work to home, grocery store, home, taking your kids to school and home. And that's great. You're not driving down the street going like, oh man, there's people everywhere. Look at these, unless there's something overtly obvious on the street corner, a big tent, some guy acting on the corner acting crazy, your attention is drawn to that. You're like, this isn't right. I don't feel safe. That's when your bubble kind of gets popped, right? Or your car gets broken into in your driveway, which is your safe space, right? Your bubble gets popped. And I view my job as a police officer is to keep your bubble intact so it doesn't get popped, right? That's what I'm out there doing. I'm trying to prevent crime. If I am solely responding to your victimization, right, that's not good. Police shouldn't be, that's part of what we do, but we shouldn't be having to do that. I should stop that guy before he breaks into your stuff. That makes sense?
Yeah, proactive.
So, I remember an old cop. So I was 21 years old. He was probably 50 at the time. He'd been through a lot. He said that I'm going to say this in generalization, that not every burglar is a drug user, but every drug user is a burglar. Drug user is a thief, I should say, a thief.
I know.
Because there's a correlation to that, right?
You touched upon at the very beginning of this conversation that drugs naturally,
they do.
You have to pay for them.
And he was an old burglary detective, and he said if I went out the night before and arrested all the people that were doing drugs, I didn't have any property crimes that night. And this is back in the late 90s when he told me this. So he's talking about, he grew up through the 80s and 90s being a cop. There's a direct correlation to that. And that's where we talk about that accountability factor also back to that.
Would that fall under that idea of community policing?
Mm-hmm.
Is where it's getting heavily involved in your community.
Yeah.
I think you see TV shows. We grew up on the West Coast, right? And the West Coast doesn't have the history and the traditions the East Coast does, just like the East Coast doesn't have what Europe has.
Yeah.
But that idea of you saw that police officers on the old New York, Chicago, they walked a beat.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Everybody in that community knew Officer Berg.
Yep.
And the second something went down, Officer Berg knew exactly who it was. It was Johnny.
Yep.
And somehow that's because it sounds like that's what he did. He went out, hey, I see you, you see me.
Yep. You know what happened?
What happened?
Police officers started driving police cars. And naturally, you drive down the street, you're driving 25, 30 miles an hour, and you drive by and you don't stop, and you're not walking by the business. And the person says, hey, officer, how you doing? And you stop and talk to that business owner. You know what I mean? So hence, we put officers on bicycles downtown recently. It's been a long time coming, and because it forces them to be more interactive with the public, right, and getting to know people. And so as a police officer...
Human-to-human interaction.
Yeah. As a police officer, before I went to detectives recently, last year and a half or so, prior to that, I worked the downtown beat as a patrol officer for 10, 12, 15 years maybe. That just loved that downtown.
And now you're off, now that it got completely remodeled, they pulled it out.
So that was one of my goals, was to see the downtown remodel. But
looks great.
Going back,
did a great job.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, not my doing, but I think I'd like to think I have a little part of that on the.
We'll give you some credit. Give you some street credit.
But I really took to heart. And going back to my school resource officer days, talking about relationships, really policing through relationships. Right. A lot of these problems, like we said, isn't a police issue. We can't arrest ourselves or give tickets to people enough to make homeless people fix what they're doing or go away, right? There's always a push for that, and force, and it's like, what does that do? And so I really found, and it takes time, right? It didn't happen overnight, but over the course of about 18 months or so, I had changed my perception on things, perspective on things, of like, how do I better solve a problem? If I can develop relationships with people that I deal with downtown, I'm talking the downtown areas, that's what I can control at the time, right? Is the downtown area. And develop relationships with the people on the street, with the business owners, with the residents, right? And kind of collectively come together and fix something. How do we best do that? And I found by going to use Yuba Street by the post office. Do you remember that when that was really bad?
Yes.
You've been here a long time.
Yes.
That was historically and before the park came in.
I was going to say
Library Park. That was going to be the end of me. I remember one day. Library Park which is where the food truck park is now, for those who don't know.
Behind the Lady Lorenz Hotel,
Correct.
Between that and the old post office.
Yep. Used to be Library Park, the old library.
The old VFW.
Yes.
Right?
Yep. All that area right in there. It would just be nonstop.
Homeless.
Nonstop.
Yeah.
And I would go there first thing in the morning, get everybody, because the Lorenz, it's a low-income senior housing.
Yep.
So all those old folks were up there, and that was overlooking. And there's people outwardly having sex in the middle of the night and using drugs and fighting, and these poor folks are sitting up there having to watch and listen to this all night long. Mm-hmm. So I'd go through and make it a point every morning. I remember one day before lunch, I went through and, hey guys, we gotta go. Let's go. I'm gonna get everybody out. They got the park clean. I'm like, all right, cool. I went to lunch. I came back an hour and a half later, and there was twice as many people there, and I broke. I'll be honest with you. I broke. I went home that night, and I was like, and I almost was in tears of like, I don't know what to do. And we tell my wife, because I care so much. I care so much about those people in that area and what they're doing. And I don't hate the homeless people that are there. They're not bad people per se, but it's like, but they were not doing good things either. And I remember going home just absolutely like, what do I do? I'm absolutely distraught over this. Like I try so hard every day to go out and fix these problems for my community, and I can't. And they just keep coming back, almost stronger the next time. And it really kind of made me refocus on how do I solve this. So I started like just taking the time and developing relationships with them, getting to know. There's a guy named Jessica, a guy named Joe, another guy named Nick. I'm just using a couple of names as an example.
Yeah.
People that are my biggest problem people, and just getting to know them and taking the time to get out of the car and speak to them, treat them like a human being, try to fix what they're doing. Right? Let's do this. To get them more on track, and combined with some accountability, right? And if they weren't doing what they should have been doing, I had to hold them accountable. If that means they had outstanding warrants, if that means they were doing something criminal, I'd take enforcement action on them. But do it, not just here's your ticket and I'm leaving, right? Here's your ticket, this is why. Because you didn't do A, B, C, D like I'd asked you to do, right? And through that, I developed a kind of a self-proclaimed rule in the downtown area. And we jokingly call it Ready Media Code 141, which is my ID number, it's 141. And it's not a law. Let me preface this with it's not a law. It's simply a rule that I had that I asked people to comply with. And that rule was to wear your t-shirt downtown. If you're in the downtown area, and I'm not a tyrant, right? If you're running as a workout, not from the cops, but as a workout, you can have your shirt off. If you're at a public beach or a pool, you can have your shirt off. If you're doing yard work in your own yard, you can have your shirt off. And I don't like it, but you can have your shirt off driving your car. I don't like it, but you can do it. But if you're just bebopping through downtown, put your shirt on. Wear your shirt, right? And so it kind of became a joke, but it became a thing too. And I would have conversations with people on the street that would be walking downtown with their shirt off. And I'd be, hey man, can you put your shirt on for me, please? Well, I don't have to put my shirt on, blah, blah, blah. And they argue with me. They stop me, get out of the car, and they go, listen, you're right. I can't make you put your shirt on. It's not a law. It is a rule that I would like you to do for me. It's a favor I'd like you to do for me, right? And here's the reasons why. And I always explain this to them. And this goes to a bigger picture at the end of I'm done with my story.
Please.
And so what's the first thing you do when you get in a fight?
Take off your shirt.
Take my shirt off, right? Yeah, right? Yeah, but I don't care what people think about me. You're right, you don't. And that's the first problem. If you don't care what people think, then you're more likely to commit a crime because you don't care, right? My wife and my kids driving down the street don't want to see you on the street corner, looking all the way you do with your shirt off, standing there sweating or whatever you're doing, or just trying to be cool. Nobody wants to see that. Nobody in this community wants to see that. But you don't care, so you're more likely to commit a crime, right? And so by you simply putting your shirt on, you care. And that's the first step to maybe doing something better in your life, right? And I had this conversation with them. I'd spend some time talking to them, and if they didn't comply, they didn't comply. It is what it is. But at the end of the conversation, almost exclusively, everybody went, you're right, Berg, I appreciate that, thanks. And they put their shirt on, and they'd walk off. And it got to the point where they would start enforcing each other, right? Because if one guy there was a group of people standing around, if one guy had his shirt off, they'd all be like, put shirt off, because they know I'd show up and come on, guys, what's the rule? But it wasn't about wearing your shirt. It was about caring. About caring about yourself.
Understood.
Right?
Yeah.
And if you care more a little bit about yourself and maybe what other people think about you, right, then you're more likely to do good things, right? And unfortunately, homeless people are often not respected by people driving by people yelling at them. Cops sometimes show up and treat them, not very well as far as how they spoke to them historically. And I don't blame anybody for doing those things because it's frustrating, right? It's frustrating to drive down the street to the grocery store and seeing the things that we see every day. So people roll down their windows and yell at them. So they go, well, F you, I don't have to, these people hate me. So why am I going to do anything that, makes their life easier? But changing their perspective on things, you just presented yourself better. If you walk down the street with your shirt on and act like a normal person, nobody's going to yell at you, right? Nobody's going to be upset with you because you're just being the guy walking down the street. Nobody cares. It's all this other craziness that you do that people care about. And that's why people are mad at you. And so you need to change your behaviors in order to change other people's behaviors. And so the t-shirt rule kind of came out of that. And I didn't enforce it outside of the downtown area. This is, it's just kind of a concept I've had of if you're in my downtown area, I call it my downtown area because it's just kind of the area that I patrolled. By no means it is mine, it's everybody's. But I developed that relationship with people and they understood because I took the time to explain it to them why it was important and the bigger picture of things. I found people started acting better, right? It's silly. It's a silly little thing.
I know what you mean, though.
But then I can go up and go hey, Nick, get your stuff and get going. You'd be like, ooh, okay, Berg, right? And he'd get his stuff and he'd leave. And guess what? I just solved the problem. I didn't write him a ticket. I didn't yell at them. You start getting out just writing tickets and walking away. Now it's hey, get your stuff and go. No, just write me my ticket, right? And it becomes this headbutting thing between the cops and it doesn't solve anything. And so it's not overnight, which is why most people don't do it because it takes work and it takes some dedication. It takes really caring to do that on a long-term basis because it took a long time to get those relationships. But it got to the point where I could show up and just go hey, you know what time it is? You got to go. Okay, sorry. And they'd apologize and get their stuff and leave. And eventually it just, they just kind of realized that they didn't want to put me through that anymore, right? Yeah. And it's more about, and I related to your mentor in life, right? You have a mentor as your dad or a good friend or something like that. I have my dad and some startups I've worked for over the years. I just didn't want to disappoint that guy, right? I didn't care about getting in trouble. I get in trouble, I get my pee-pee slapped, but I didn't want to disappoint you. And it became more of that, my wife calls it kind of that father figure role of they just didn't want to disappoint me. right? They didn't want to get to the spot where Berg had to show up and they'd be embarrassed because they were doing something silly.
And you were probably the only person of authority in their life.
Yeah.
That they had like a level of respect for it.
Yeah, and some accountability for. And
Which
really
is important.
Yeah.
That's an important part of being a human.
I remember one guy. It was I don't remember his name. He was fresh out of prison. He'd been in prison for 10 years. He was like 32, so most of his adult life. And he was new. He was new to the downtown area, so I got to reintroduce myself to the new guy and kind of tell him kind of my expectations of them as they're going to be in our area. And about 2 weeks into it, I just drove by and hey man, how you doing? He goes, Berg, I just want to thank you. And I go, what? He's like, I've been in prison my entire adult life. I wake up and somebody tells me where to go eat, where to go to the bathroom, where to do this, but I kind of be in the military, right? They tell you where to go. And now they throw me out on the street because I'm done with my term and I don't have a place to live. I don't know when to go eat, when to go do this. And so I start doing stupid stuff because I don't know what else to do. But you come by every day and you take the time to hold me accountable, make sure I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, ask me if I'm doing okay, right? And that's all it takes. And he said, I appreciate that. I need some sort of structure in my life, and you're helping provide that structure. Obviously, I can't do that 24/7. That's not, it's not plausible. But I provided enough that he acknowledged me through that. And that was like kind of, I drove away kind of going like, wow, mind blown. That was wild. Like, here's some guy's been in prison his whole adult life. Just thank me for giving him a little structure. But it was because I respected him. I was respectful towards him.
I think that's key.
I was respectful towards him.
Yeah.
And I don't take their crap either, right? There might be times, there's times as a police officer when somebody's going, you can be a nice guy and do all this fluffy stuff that I'm kind of talking about. But there's people that simply won't go with that. And simply people that hate you and want to hurt you or do bad things regardless. And there's time for police to do what they have to do to get things done, right? And hold people accountable. And there's times when people have to have force used against them because they're going to jail and they don't know the program. So there's two sides of that, right?
Absolutely.
It's not all of that. Police get emphasized because of the use of force stuff, right? That's what most people see. How are you talking about the dog biting people? It's a very small fraction of what they actually do. They mostly 98.9% of the time they're finding people. 0.9% of the time they're biting people. Same with police use of force. We have thousands of contacts just in the city of Redding every single day. Every single day we have thousands of contacts. And the amount of use of force we use on people is very, very small. It happens, but that's glamorous, right? That's what the media wants to see. That's what gets, all the attention. How many times have you heard about me making connections with people on the street and solving problems that way?
Until you and I spoke today, never.
Never.
I knew it existed, though.
Yeah, it does.
I've known as community officers. You're
And
right.
There is.
That's
But
what I
that's
meant
not
by me
glamorous.
not plugging into media because they don't want to.
Yeah.
It's got to be pure. If it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's unfortunate.
And that's where I made my connection with Jonathan Anderson of the Mission. I was the downtown parking structure was a big issue for a long time.
I remember that. Oh yeah.
And I remember one of the news reporters in town wanted to do a news thing on the homelessness and the downtown parking structure. And I was out there that morning doing my thing, getting them out of there. And the news reporter interviewed me. I asked the sergeant, can I do an interview for the news? I don't care. He's like, yeah, go for it. And I talked about just what we talked about in a very brief, 30-second interview about building relationships and we can't arrest ourselves out of the situation, yada, yada. And even Mosley is a dear friend of mine. She reached out to Jonathan. Jonathan was like, I want to know who this guy is. Like, that's what he said was fantastic. Jonathan reaches out to me. We go ride along. We've been great friends ever since. And that's awesome. It's awesome. But he goes, dude, what you're doing is called outreach. I mean, that's not outreach, right? That's for cops. That's kind of like, I'm not a social worker. I don't do outreach. He's like, no, but you do. And so I drove out to Anderson and we talked to all these people that were out on the street. And I want Jonathan to see and hear from them what their experiences were. Because I always ask them, go to the mission. I'm not going there. The bed bugs, they're bed bugs. Or the pastor there is a such and such. I don't like him. He's not around anymore. But, they always had an excuse of why they can't go. So I'd go there, and I didn't tell him who Jonathan was. I'd say, why aren't you going to the mission? Blah, 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 this and this. I go, really? Oh, well, here's the big boss. I turn around and introduce Jonathan, who runs the mission. He dispels all the myths of the mission. That is not, I've heard that same rumor about so-and-so. That's not true, blah, blah, blah. We have metal bed frames. We don't have bed bugs. Like, it's impossible. All the things, just to try to curb, maybe get a couple of those guys to go, But anyway, that's how my relationship with Jonathan started, of just that. Him seeing that short little news interview about what we're talking about here today. And just, how do we solve this problem? How do we work with law enforcement to solve this problem?
I think that's a good segue to talk about, what are some of the things that we can do that people can get involved in their community? Because I'm a big believer, and I want to give a disclaimer that I struggle with. I can sit here right now on camera and say like, "Hey man, we got to help each other, and we got to lift each other."
Sure.
And I'll drive down the road, and the negative voice, like you said, and I don't honk or anything, but you go somewhere, and you see trash, and you see these things, and there's a part of me that just you get upset. You're like, man, and then there's another part that's like, there by the grace of God go I. That's a human being. It's a brother and a sister, and somebody's child,
right.
and I see young people. It breaks my heart to see. I don't know why. I can see an older person, someone my age, and I don't like it. But then when I've seen some of the people that they look like they're 19 years old, 18 years old. How is that person on the street?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I don't want it to come off like, oh yeah, and I'm like Jesus. I just go around loving everybody. Like, no, it's a battle inside to half wanting to help that person and half going, well, if you help that person, that's just, they're going to take whatever you give them and then they're going to go buy drugs.
Right.
And trying to find that balance of like, what is something people can do to try to help our community?
Absolutely.
What are some things?
And that's a common question I have and a common question that I see. Faith-wise, I understand that argument. I'm a believer, I'm a Christian, I understand that argument. As a realist and a law enforcement professional who sees this every day, I also see that argument. I find something in the middle of, I think that as a community, one of the worst things we can do is help support those habits by saying, hey, here's $5. Right to the guy standing on the corner with the thing that says, I need food. Because I will tell you, by educating myself, that the mission offers 3 meals a day to anybody who wants to go in there. You might have been kicked out of the mission because of behavior, because they do that sometimes because that shows up there, they get 86 for 30 days, or you might have been in the 30 days out and the 30 days in. You can still go there and get food. There's no reason for anybody in the city of Redding or the county of Shasta to ask for food. They're trying to get money to buy their drugs.
But what about if you gave them food?
Correct. So,
would you say that's okay? If you see somebody maybe on the other side of town, they're several miles from.
Sure. So I want you to do this experiment and get a cheeseburger and give a cheeseburger to somebody who's asking for food, and then drive around the corner and watch them. Okay.
Yeah.
So I used to kind of feel that way too, and I distinctly remember the day I was off duty, but I was at the Eureka Way by the YMCA, and a car pulls a guy standing on the corner. I want food, standing there, and the minivan pulls up. This little 7-year-old girl, she looks about 7-year-old blonde girl, gets out of the car, runs up to him with his bag of Burger King from across, or Carl's Jr., gives it to him. And he goes, oh, thank you. And she runs back, all smiling, gets in the car, and they drive off. And he takes the Burger King and puts it in his bag and stands back up with his food. I want food. And I went, I was so angry.
Well, he also wants drugs.
He does. They're wanting the money. And yes, they'll eat it, sure. But, had he truly just wanted food, he would have taken the sign down and went. And I'm using one person as an example, but I've seen that over and over and over and over again. And so I think...
So in other words, don't give direct. If you want, give to like an organization like the Rescue Mission that says, we will make sure that there's food.
Yes.
Because I know that I know they feed people, and I know a lot of people that volunteer and for the various seasonal things, the holiday, and they go in, and so, okay.
I highly recommend it. I give to the mission every year, and I'm proud of it. I post it on social media to just for the exposure of like, hey, this is a good organization. Let's do that. Let's do this. There's several organizations in town. I'm just using the mission as one example, but if you look online, there's dozens of organizations in town that do that. There are some organizations that go out into the parks and feed people. I'm conflicted on that, whether or not they're helping the problem or not. There's people we will see commonly people show up, or even some of these organizations show up with big trash bags full of clothes. And they'll walk up to a group of homeless folks and give them the bag of clothes. And what they do with that is they throw all the stuff they don't want aside, and they leave it all laying there, and they end up in the river, smash your stuff, sorry, on the river, all sorts of stuff. So it's the mission has clothes, Goodwill has clothes, all these places have clothes you can go get free clothes at. It's not hard to do. I go back to the showing up and giving people stuff isn't the right way to do things. I think you should be giving the organizations who are organized and understand the problems to go out and fix those problems. If we donate to those organizations, they can do that in the proper way. That's my
message.
My feeling.
I got the message clear, and I'm sure everybody does. Yeah. So let the people who have committed themselves to doing that versus direct. It's just and I know what you mean by the because you see them with like 2 shopping carts full of stuff, and you're like, I don't think they need stuff.
Right, they don't.
It's like I feel like they need mental help. You know, I feel like we need to bring back. You know, it's just
it becomes counterproductive at some point too, right? Part of going to the mission to get food is so they can build a connection with you, right? You're going to get food, but hey, let me tell you about these other services we have, right? And maybe on the 30th time there, they go, well, okay, like I haven't been harassed yet. Maybe I'll look at these services. Maybe they get help. If people are going out into the community and giving them the food or giving them clothes, there's no purpose, no reason to go to the mission or another organization to get that help. So it becomes, they're all trying to do good things. Like I'm not bashing those people at all. They're wonderful people with good hearts.
But good intentions need to be combined
Yes.
with good actions and strategy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Good strategy.
Yes, absolutely. And these organizations spend lots of time building strategies and they understand the problems better than most people. So.
Well, okay, so that would be the big thing is, I mean, we've talked about the Good News Rescue missions, obviously, one. I had Chris Cable on here, and he was part of the Anderson Cottonwood Christian Alliance, and they were helping. You know, I used to work for the Department of Veterans Affairs, and I'm trying to remember, they call, I think, a stand down, and they twice, is this sounding familiar? I know
veterans have a lot of resources also.
Not as many as they should.
Yeah, obviously not as many as they should.
But I can't remember if it was once a year or twice a year. What they would do is they would go somewhere, like oftentimes it was the Anderson Fairgrounds, and they would set up to where the doctors, the nurses, vets, homeless vets would come in, and a dentist would look at all of them, and then a podiatrist would look at their feet, and they would hand out, you know, hey, here's toothbrush, toothpaste, here's wool socks. It was mental, whatever they could.
Yeah.
And I thought, why is this just like thank you so much, Department of Veterans Affairs, but it's like, why can't we do this? This seemed like a good thing to do,
right. And
it seemed like we should do this. We should do something where we have a place, we get them, if nothing else. I'm already thinking of the voices of people that are going to go against this one, but if nothing else, we can catalog them and get an idea of who's who, who's here, what are they, we know who, because a lot of people complain about like, oh, this homeless guy's got an iPhone. You're like, you do understand that they're trying to make sure they know where these people are, because it also helps in law enforcement. Why? Because they know where people are. Like, right? I mean, you have ability, hey, that's John, like you said, you knew their names.
Right.
You knew that he had gotten out of prison.
Then there's no tracking stuff that we do. We can't.
I didn't mean it that way.
Yeah,
I didn't mean it like James Bond.
Make sure to clarify, like we're not switching people through their
is,
phones or anything like that. Just me doing my job and knowing where
that
people
mentor
are.
law enforcement officer you said, when he went out and said, "Hey, I see you.
Yes.
You see me."
Yes.
That night there was no crime.
Yeah.
There is a connection between. You're not completely falling through the cracks. We know who you are.
Yeah,
we know that you were
absolutely.
Here at 6 p.m. on Friday
because
we saw you and we have interaction. And there's something happened. It reduces, just like put the shirt on.
Yeah.
These little things add up to reduce crime.
They do.
They do.
Accountability.
You know,
accountability. Whether it's just being accountable to me or being accountable to yourself, a little bit of both, probably. You know, that's what it boils down to. You know, there's no accountability a lot, which is what. After our first conversation of just where does that accountability start and end? You know, is it plausible for every cop to do that to every person in town? It's not. So where do we find a better solution for that? You know, we can make small differences in small little pockets of places, but it's a difficult conversation to have.
It is. These are very intricate, multi-tiered, difficult problems. Yeah. But and maybe I am Pollyanna, but I feel like if
you said you wouldn't be. Yeah.
I said I didn't want to be. Didn't say I wasn't. No, I'm incredibly paranoid, negative. I am. Yeah, make no mistake, man. I am the double-minded man of James, where there's a constant battle between the person who wants to help everybody and the person who's sure that everybody's got a gun and packing and is out to get me and everybody's a predator. And those two people take turns driving the mental car, right?
As they should.
I try to keep the paranoid guy in the back seat, try to keep him out of the, but every now and then he takes the wheel.
Yeah. A little bit of paranoid keeps you safe, just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
Yeah. Anything in moderation.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to having Jonathan Anderson on. His name comes up all the time.
He's amazing.
I wanted to have him on when I did this several years ago. Things just happened, COVID hit, and that kind of derailed this entire thing, and then just life.
Yeah.
You wake up one day, I don't know about, I'm 50. I'm about to turn 53,
Nice.
and I was like 19 yesterday. And this ride, this roller coaster, is
fast.
so fast. Enjoy it.
Yep.
Enjoy life, guys. But
raise some ghost peppers, and he'll be here in a heartbeat for you.
Ghost peppers.
He's a pepper guy.
Okay, I can't handle jalapeno.
No.
Yeah, clearly
He's
ghost pepper.
awful.
My
Yeah.
goodness.
He's got something wrong with him.
Well, I definitely want to have him on here, but I want to, because I don't know how much time we have left. I know you said 8 hours, but I assume you're joking. The cameras will overheat before then.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about something in your personal life, and if you feel comfortable talking about this, but you were involved as resource, and you actually adopted children, right? Do you feel comfortable talking about it? Yeah, you got a serious looking face.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
I felt like
Yeah.
you just crossed the line. And you were like, oh no.
Yeah.
Maybe that is paraphernalia in my pocket. Darn it.
Yeah.
No, but because I think that's really important about helping out. But you did. Was that sparked from your resource officer days?
So
what brought that up?
So my wife's in education too. So she started off as a teacher. She's now an administrator. She's been an administrator for a long time. And through the course of mostly her interactions through the schools, we've had the honor and pleasure of being involved in several young people's lives.
That's awesome.
Some more than others. Some just as mentors, professionally or whatever. But a few have come, and not officially adopted or on paper or anything like that, but in our hearts, absolutely.
Okay.
And there's two young ladies that are near and dear to our heart, and we call our daughters. They are our daughters for all intents and purposes. They have their own families and lives, obviously, outside of us. But it's just something that they were just special people to us, and just are part of our family. And I don't know how else to put it besides they're just my kids. I don't consider them adopted.
How does somebody get involved in that? Is it the organization just reach out? because that's a huge thing. I think.
For us, it just happened. It was just organic. It wasn't anything forced or through, or we weren't out seeking it. It's just through relationships and, just mentorship and guiding is how it started. And then they just kind of, just clicked with our family, and just, none of them lived with us necessarily. It wasn't that type of relationship. It was more of a mentorship. They started calling us mom and dad, and that's it. They're both grown now and have their own lives, doing their things, very successful in life, but just amazing people. And we have a heart for amazing people. No matter where you are in your life, as far as struggles go, if you're an amazing, good person, then you deserve to have somebody who will help guide you through that. By no means are we perfect. We are imperfect people as a family ourselves, as is everybody.
Of course.
We might just be a little less crazy than some other people. So
just a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, I think the sooner we can interject in people's lives. You see the spectrum, and like that guy that you said that spent his adult life in prison. He's not lost, but if you can go back and maybe have injected in that person's life at the age of 5 or 10,
who knows?
to probably have a bigger impact on the trajectory. So that's why I'm always big on anybody who's helping children.
Absolutely.
I feel like you invest time and energy into them, then you're going to have to invest more later.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mentorship is extremely important. We're not part of any official mentorship program. We know there are those out there, lots of them that do a fantastic job. But both of my girls said that just being present was enough. Showing up at a basketball game, showing up at a volleyball
Chris
game.
Cable said the same thing.
Just being there is like wildly important to kids, because there's so many kids that, especially involved in sports, that just don't have parents. Parents don't show up. They're not there. Like, I don't understand that, because my parents never missed a single event, nor have I ever missed any of my kids' events ever. So I don't comprehend that. I do comprehend being present as an adult, right? And I didn't comprehend the importance of it to them, right? Because I never experienced that myself, because they was always there. But the importance of them, for us just being present and being there. We flew to New Orleans for another gal that we were close with for a while. We still are, but she was going to a junior college in Sacramento. I don't want to say American River, but she was a jazz vocalist, and she made the national championships in New Orleans. And so my family and I flew to New Orleans just to a little vacation, but to go out and support her, and just little things like that. Of like, some things are just worth it to go be present for. And
so when you look at like prison rates, in America there's a lot put around race, but when you look at the data, it's overwhelmingly fatherless homes, it's prison, regardless of race or gender. The numbers are pretty consistent. That there's nobody there. There's nobody present.
Absolutely, 100%.
And unfortunately, and that's not really for this conversation, but that's part of that social experiment that started in the '60s of financially incentivizing fatherless homes.
Right.
And it did attack a particular demographic first.
And still affecting us as a society today.
Oh, absolutely.
Generations later.
Because it's still in effect. It's still there. So just saying, like, just being present. Chris talked about just, he's involved in Catalyst Mentoring, which is combining with another, a good host would know the name of the other organization. That I think it's Pathways, maybe. I think that's it. Right. And then he's also involved in Girls Inc., which is a national or maybe even international level, where helping young women and stuff like that. And he had a couple of great stories about just little tiny things he did, just being there, playing cards with one of the kids, thinking like, well, this is no big deal. And then the kids, my life was changed because you spent some time with me
and cared.
Yeah. And it was like, really?
Yeah.
That was all it took?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, yeah, when you have nothing, something little is a lot.
Yeah. Hey, kids and young adults see through BS. If you're there just to put a feather in my cap, say I'm being a mentor, and because you're trying to, promote yourself or your business or something like that, kids see through that.
Well, yeah.
Right? If you're there
genuine.
If you're being there genuinely, like, it's not going to take long for a kid to be like, hey, like, this person cares. Yeah. You know what I mean? They might not invite me to their house, but they care. And that's all, for most kids in those situations, that's all they really need. You could do more for sure, but at the very least, if you're genuine about it, you're going to reach your kid.
I think that's everybody.
Yeah,
I think
for sure.
Your stories of learning their names, the 32-year-old guy out of prison, that's what that was. You guys didn't hug it out, and you didn't go and you were even shocked by just that little bit of a respectful interaction, how much you got out of it, because they come from a world that has so little of that.
Yeah,
little of that.
Yeah.
And we take it for granted in our world.
Yeah.
I hope you've had a good time today.
Fantastic.
I've had a good time.
We talked forever, yeah.
If there was, in parting, if there was something like to the community, say, hey, like we've obviously promoted Jonathan Anderson and new Good News Rescue Mission. I always want to bring up Catalyst and Pathway, Girls Inc. If there's any more, please reach out. Anything to do with mentoring children, I think that's our future. I want to help everybody, but I think the best investment, the younger you can invest in them, the better the investment, the ROI is, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Because this is a capitalist society, and everything has to come back to money. So every metaphor has to be, our stocks will rise high. So anyway, but other than that, are there any other that we didn't touch upon? You said, hey, you should reach out to this or contact that person. Any community? Put you on the spot.
Yeah, put me on the spot.
I need a phone number right now.
Top of my head, yeah. There's so many organizations out there that mean well. I would again go back to make sure it's someplace that's organized, a legitimate local organization. Those are going to do the best for our community. We can donate to the large organizations too, but a lot of that money doesn't stay local, and a lot of that money doesn't go towards
keep it local.
It should go towards a lot of big organizations keep fees for themselves and their administrative stuff. You want to make sure it's going 100% local. Already know our local organizations have administrative fees. That's natural with any organization you're going to run, but keep it local and make sure you're vetted who you're donating to.
Awesome.
So,
well, I appreciate your time. My hands got even clammier, so I feel like I was interrogated. It might be these lights,
it's kind of
or it might be that you're Officer Berg